Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Tiger Club of Kansas City Zoom call for Tuesday, February 9th. We're very excited to have today the father-son team of Pat Forde and Mitchell Forde. Before we get to them, I would like to thank our sponsors, Chicken and Pickle in North Kansas City, Sports Scene in Lee's Summit, Conrad's Restaurant and Ale House in Liberty, Tiger Board out of Columbia, and Stables Grill in Kearney. We also have an announcement I'd like to make that we have tentatively scheduled a golf tournament for this year, and that will be Monday, August 23rd. We'll have more details on that in the coming weeks. And as always, go to kctigerclub.com for information on membership and events. Again, our guest today, Pat Forde, senior college sports writer for Sports Illustrated. His son, Mitchell Forde, who does a great job with PowerMizzou, both graduates of our journalism school, as am I, but you guys have made a little better living than hosting a free podcast every week. You guys are doing great. Pat, of course, has a long career, was with the Louisville Courier Journal, ESPN, Yahoo Sports, and then in 2019 joined Sports Illustrated. Mitchell, former letterman on the Mizzou swimming team, and he's been with PowerMizzou for several years. Gentlemen, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks.
Glad to be with you. I wish we could all get together in person. I know we did. Was it last year or the year before? I can't remember now. And it was a lot of fun, but we will take what we can get in a pandemic year.
I know you guys are huge Denver Broncos fans, and my plan today was gloat about the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl, but that got derailed. I do want to go off topic, though. Today we mourn the passing of former Chiefs coach Marty Schottenheimer. Pat, in your long career, did you ever cross paths with Marty?
Briefly, covered some of his teams when I did do a little bit of NFL coverage when I was at the Courier Journal. Great coach, really well respected throughout the sport. Unbelievable coaching tree. The number of guys that worked under him who have gone on to do great things. And, he was always just this much short of a Super Bowl, which maybe, kept people from fully appreciating his legacy as a coach and as an impactful person in college football, in the NFL. But, he will be missed for sure. And gosh, it seems like we've just had too many of these lately, but, thoughts with certainly with the Schottenheimer family.
Well, it's a sad day for Kansas City. And of course, no team tormented Marty more than your Denver Broncos when he was with Cleveland and the Chiefs. Of course, remember the Cleveland, the drive and the fumble. But outside of getting to the big game, he certainly has Hall of Fame credentials.
Absolutely. No, I think that, he will definitely be a Hall of Famer. Whenever he's eligible for that. And he had a lot of great years at Kansas City and Cleveland, and just did a lot of great work throughout the sport and touched a lot of people.
Mitchell, let's talk about the Mizzou Tigers. They looked like they were going to make a major statement Saturday, and they still did with a win over Alabama. But gosh, that last 5 minutes was just grueling. But the Tigers are up to 10th in the nation, and they look well poised for the NCAA tournament. What's your assessment of the team at this point of the season?
Man, it's been so interesting. Like, you mentioned Saturday. I can never remember watching a game like that in the past where you get a, kind of a marquee win, beat a top 10 team, beat a team that was undefeated in SEC play, and you kind of come out of it not knowing whether to feel good or not, because of how it happened. I mean, there's definitely, I think, an element of like, man, did they miss an opportunity? But at the same time, I think if you had, obviously been told waking up that morning that Missouri was going to win that game at all, you would feel good. So kind of one of those weird things. This has been a unique team where they're clearly the sum is better than the parts. And, I think that's why some of the metrics don't love them. They don't have, they've got several good players. Jeremiah Tillman's been playing really good ball. Drew Smith's been the SEC player of the week 3 times, and I think probably has a good chance to be a first team all conference player, but they really don't have any guys that like leap out as stars. But they are super experienced, and they found ways to win close games, and they found a lot of different ways to win, which I think is probably encouraging. I mean, you had that game against TCU where they had to finally make some shots, and they did. And you had Tillman and Pinson combined for 69 points. And then you had this past Saturday where they shot like 15% from three, had like 4 different guys scoring double digits. So, they're definitely playing with fire by playing all these close games. They've won 3 in a row now by like a combined, I think, I want to say 11 points. They probably won't continue to win every single close game they play, but I think you have to, especially given kind of the state that the program has been in the past, 7-8 years, and even, the past couple of years, have to be pretty pleased with what this team has done this season.
Devontae Shuler of Ole Miss and Drew Smith were the co-SEC players of the week. Tigers take on Ole Miss tomorrow night in Mississippi, in Oxford. It looks like a tough matchup. Mizzou seems to have struggled at times with teams that have really good point guards, and Ole Miss has a couple of really strong seniors in Shuler and Romello White.
Yeah, it is. I think a tough matchup. I mean, for one, Ole Miss, I think, is better than it had been playing for a lot of this season, and they're kind of starting to show that. They had a good week last week. They beat Tennessee. They beat Auburn. Their defense is really good. They play a zone, which is not something you see a ton of. Kind of in this day and age, they defend the 2 really well. The one thing they kind of haven't done very well defensively is guarding the 3, but Missouri has not shot the 3 very well. They force a lot of turnovers. And then Devontae Shuler is a good player. He's been around, seems like, forever. He gets into the lane well, which is something that Missouri has, struggled at times to defend, although I thought they did a pretty good job guarding one-on-one, drivers against Alabama. So a road game in the SEC is always tough. There's very few easy ones, and you're going against an experienced team that also has kind of some momentum. So it's it's a game Missouri I'm sure is favored in, but it would not come as a shock by any means if they were to drop that one.
Tigers moving up to number 10 in the polls this week. Pat, I'm looking at these analytical polls. Mizzou's ranked 10th, as I said, in the 2 AP and coaches poll. They are a number 3 seed on Joe Lunardi's new bracketology just came out today. But then you look at KenPom, the NCAA Net, Sagarin, BPI. They're like range from 25 to 35. What are we missing on those analytical polls that the Tigers are rated well below KU, even though they have a much better quad 1 record?
Yeah, it is strange. I think that generally speaking, Missouri has been moderate. Obviously, they've been very successful on the court, but they've been only moderately successful when you crunch numbers and try to get into the analytical side of it. I mean, like, I'm looking at KenPom right now. They're 39th offensively, 32nd defensive. Not like they stand out in either area, but I mean, I look at them and see what they've put on the floor. I think it's been a very exciting, fun, rewarding season if you're a Missouri fan. I mean, the wins that they have are great. You beat Oregon and beat them handily. You beat Illinois. Wichita State isn't bad. And then you get into the conference, you split with Tennessee. And I said last week was the best week for Missouri basketball since they joined the SEC. You beat Kentucky, and I know Kentucky's down, but it's Kentucky. And Kentucky had beaten Missouri 13 out of 14 times historically. You win that game. You have to white knuckle it at the end, but then you turn around and you dominate Alabama for 30 minutes, and then you hang on to beat Alabama, but you beat Alabama. So you take away that, and I think that's a great week. So I like this team. As Mitchell said, the inconsistency in playing with fire, that's not really a good formula when you get to a single elimination tournament. To not be able to finish games well, that's kind of scary. But what they've done so far, I love, and maybe the metrics don't love them, but I mean, if you're a Missouri fan, you got to be awfully tickled with the results and the wins, the quality wins that they've put on the board.
Pat, you had in your 40 for 40 to yesterday, you talked a lot about coaches who might be on the hot seat. I thought it was a really interesting column. One I wanted to ask you about, especially since you have a lot of Kentucky ties in your career, John Calipari, is he getting any heat down there?
Oh, he's getting a lot of heat. Now, it's like impossible for them to fire him. For one thing, it would be crazy because he's, had an incredible run of success. And this is a COVID year. Now, I mean, this is as bad a year as Kentucky has had in a century, like since 1927, literally. So it's really bad. But they're not going to fire him. First of all, he's got a quote unquote lifetime contract at like $8 million a year. It would cost like $50 million to buy him out. Now, does he say, I'm tired of getting the kind of criticism that I've received? It's not out of the question. And he looks to go somewhere else. But the fans are on him. I mean, it's pretty ugly because fans here are just not accustomed to 5-12. And all along, it was kind of like, well, we'll buy into the one and done philosophy as long as it works, but we don't really like it. This is the fan standpoint of it's not our cup of tea, but if it's working, if we're winning, if we're going to the Final Four, if we're winning national championships, fine. Well, they haven't won a championship since 2012 and they haven't been in the Final Four since 2015. And now they're terrible. So I think now some of that kind of submerged dissatisfaction is really bubbling over.
I want to throw this question out to both of you. We had John Sunvold on a couple of weeks ago, and he was asked about the struggles of the blue blood programs this year. He had a very interesting and actually very frank answer. He said, the shoe money's dried up. I'd like to throw that open to both of you. What do you think?
You want to go first? I feel like you'd probably have a better ability to speak on the whole kind of landscape.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, right now it's amazing. Actually, the top 25, the 13 winningest programs in the history of college basketball are all unranked right now, which is astounding. And I did write last week about Kentucky being way down, Kansas is down, North Carolina's down, Duke's down, Michigan State is down. Certainly what John said, there is some credence to it. Like Kansas is not recruiting the way Kansas had been recruiting. Why is that? I don't know, but you could probably surmise. Kentucky's recruiting has taken a bit of a downturn as well. Duke, this is not a very good class for them. If you look at the 2020 freshmen, like the incoming freshman class, 2 of the top 5 guys are in the G League. They went straight there, and I think you're going to see more people considering that. And then you got a guy at Oklahoma State, which is unusual. You got a guy at USC. And both those places were hires based on family. Like Evan Mobley's at USC, his dad is an assistant coach there. Cade Cunningham at Oklahoma State, his brother is an assistant coach. So you just kind of put together these factors, and the recruiting has not been as good. Is part of that some teams had to play it straighter than they had before? Yeah, I'm sure it is. That's not all of it, but that's a contributing factor.
Yeah, I think the talent is probably more spread out just because of the G League, and like he said, just the fact that you I think it's not just with the family thing, but it's a kind of a recent trend where you've seen 5-star one and done type guys say, well, if I'm only gonna I'm going to college for 1 year, I'll go to a school like Oklahoma State or LSU or something like that, where you can be the big fish in a small pond, and maybe you don't win it all, but you can kind of be revered and be kind of a hero there forever. And then also, I mean, the experience thing, like we just talked about with Missouri, I think it really is a huge factor this year. Imagine you've got a group like Kentucky where they don't really know each other. They're all coming in either as transfers or as, from guys out of high school, and you don't have off-season practices. You don't have the time away from the sport to get to know each other and trust each other. And so, things start going off the rails. It's hard to get it back on. And I think the exact opposite is a team like Missouri, where, they didn't, Conzo Martin, I think, didn't actually start making everyone practice together, like have full-time team practices until like September. They had a few guys here over the summer, but he basically, was fine with people staying home, encouraged them to stay home, did kind of, split up workouts because he knew what he had and these guys knew each other. And they've played together really well. And I think that's, gone a long way towards them, like I mentioned earlier, kind of finding different ways to win and relying kind of on one another. So, I think this year is kind of a perfect storm from that standpoint, where experience has really been magnified.
Huge, I think, for Missouri, but just amplify on that. That's the juniors and seniors that they've had there now in their 3rd and 4th year together, I think has been immensely important for Missouri.
excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. Pat, you had a tweet in the last hour about the Big Ten moving its conference tournament to Indianapolis. Is my understanding this year that teams can opt out of their conference tournaments if they want, if they feel like their seed is. Do you see that happening? And do you see any conference tournaments in jeopardy at this point?
Well, that's going to really be something to watch for the next month. Everybody technically, I think, has a chance to opt out of whatever they want, but there's going to also be, I think, significant pressure behind the scenes from the leagues and from the television networks for people to not opt out. Because if there's one time college basketball rates, it's in March, and those conference tournaments do rate. And so ESPN, which is going to show 200 conference tournament games that 1 week, they don't want to be showing a conference tournament that doesn't have good teams in it, or at least well-known teams with big fan bases. So, Kentucky is not going to want to opt out because they want to try to get an NCAA bid, and that's going to be their only chance. But, if you look like at the Big 12, I mean, would a Baylor try to opt out? Maybe, because you're trying to win a national championship. You don't need your conference tournament. All you can do is go get more COVID there, and they're already on a pause for that. So I think there's going to be some real decision-making on various campuses of what do we want to do. But again, I think the league offices will really kind of ramp it up behind the scenes, say, hey, we not only need you there, we want you there. We're going to create a safe environment. I mean, that's the Big Ten announcing they're all going to Indy. One of the selling points of that, and to try to get everybody there, is we can contain everything in Indy. It's a good city for it. And that's why they're having the NCAA tournament there, the whole thing. And so, they want the teams to play, but it's going to be up to the individual schools and the individual coaches to make those decisions. And I am sure we will see some of them. Gonzaga, what does Gonzaga have to win by going to Las Vegas to play that tournament? I would stay home if I were them and try to keep everybody in a bubble and wait to try to win the first national championship in school history.
We're talking with Pat Forde of Sports Illustrated and his son Mitchell of PowerMizzou. If you'd like to ask them a question, please go to our chat feature at the bottom of your screen, and we'll ask them at the end of our period today. Going back to Mitchell, the Tigers this week will take on Ole Miss. They'll take on Arkansas. As you said, I don't think there's a game they can't win, but there's probably a game they can't lose. One thing I wanted to ask you, have you heard anything about making up the missed games, the LSU Vanderbilt games?
Yeah, so Greg Sankey actually was at the TCU game a couple Saturdays ago, and we got a chance to ask him a few questions and ask him about that. And there is one weekend kind of built in for makeup games between the end of the regular season and the conference tournament. He was not very specific about will they play, like, if Missouri needs to make up 2 games as they do right now, will they try to squeeze 2 games into that one stretch? He was non-committal. He basically said, the opportunity still exists as of right now, as of that, I guess, 2 Saturdays ago, to play every game that was supposed to be on the men's basketball schedule. But we also just have to kind of be okay with not everyone playing the same number of games and seeding the conference by win percentage. I will be curious to see, if they decide just to use that weekend and make up 1 game kind of for each team who's missed one or something, how they prioritize that. Because in one sense, if you're Missouri and you have a chance at, somehow you end up a game back of Alabama or something like that, or you have the same number of losses as Alabama but a lower win percentage, and 1 more win gets you an SEC title, you want to play Vandy. But otherwise you maybe want to play LSU because just playing better opponents helps your net rating and stuff like that. So that will be interesting to see if the school has any sort of input. And also the thing I was going to circle back to, actually, with our conversation with Greg Sankey, got a chance to ask him also about the conference tournament thing. And again, he didn't declare anything. But one thing that he said that I thought was interesting was he said, we're the conference who, at the end of football season, if you remember when teams were, pushing back games and making up games, the ACC had Notre Dame and Clemson basically just stop playing because they were, pretty much set to make it the playoff as long as Clemson beat Notre Dame in the title game, in the league title game. Whereas, the SEC did have teams that were in college football playoff contention play on December 12th. And Sankey kind of did equate the conference tournament to that, saying, we're built on competition. We're going to try to get everyone to, compete because we think winning the league means something. Now, is he going to absolutely force teams to show up to Nashville? I doubt it, but I do think that pressure will probably be there from the league office.
Pat, I want to ask you about a story unrelated to college that you wrote recently, a cover story for Sports Illustrated about Cleat Keller. I think everybody knows he was the former Olympic gold medalist swimmer who was seen as in the mob storming the Capitol on January 6th. Tell us a little about that story and any insights you can give into the young man. I know he's had a troubled history.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. And I fortunately, through Mitchell and his two siblings being college swimmers and coming up through the swimming ranks, I've gotten to know a lot of people in swimming. So I had a lot of contacts there. And I did cover the 2008 Olympics in Beijing when he won an Olympic gold or relay gold medal there. So, I was familiar with who he was, and then could talk to enough people who were around him about, hey, what the heck happened? Because this was a guy between 2000 and 2008. He was, on top of the world, at least within his sport. He won 5 medals, was a hero on the 2004 800 freestyle Olympic team, helping Michael Phelps win a gold medal with a great anchor swim there. But before and after that, not a good life. His upbringing, that was one of the things that surprised me. And I used as the lead anecdote for the story, not a good relationship with his parents. John Urbanchek, when he was a coach at Michigan, went for the home recruiting visit, because everybody wanted Cleat Keller. He was the top recruit in the country. And the mom pulled him aside and said, "You're wasting your time. He's never going to get through college." It's like, usually in a recruiting home visit, you are putting on your best presence to, about your son or daughter or whatever, to say, hey, please, recruit my child. And this was the exact opposite. And that kind of, I think, was a hint at what his upbringing was like. And then after he quit swimming, with no real family support structure, his life went pretty well to hell. He got married and then he got divorced, had 3 kids. His wife kicked him out of the house. He was homeless for a while. He was fired from his jobs. He was estranged from his kids. So a lot went on that I think kind of made him a bit of a lost soul, so to speak. And then, he latched on to a degree to Donald Trump and to some of the right-wing ideology, and decided that he wanted to go to that rally. And then he ends up in the Capitol, and there's no evidence that within the Capitol that he was violent, that he was destroying anything, that he was armed, any of that. But he was there, and he's facing charges and up to 15 years worth of prison time. I don't know, if he would see all that time. And it's just pretty stunning story, really, of, you can look at somebody who at one point in time was on a podium singing the Star Spangled Banner with his hand over his heart, and then later is storming the capital of that same country. It's a pretty shocking turn of events.
Really a sad story. Mitchell, let's talk about Mizzou football. You are in the midst of doing on PowerMizzou a position by position breakdown looking into the 2021 season. I recommend everybody go in and read it. If you're not subscribing to PowerMizzou, please do. But Mitchell, overall, without going through every position, they look like they've got some depth this year, which really was missing at the end of last season.
Yeah, I think it's turning out that the NCAA's decision to let seniors come back is definitely helping Missouri. There were a few spots where you would have thought maybe they were going to really be thin next year, like defensive line, offensive line, where they're bringing back some key guys, so that should help. Obviously, you'll have Connor Bazelak back at quarterback, and really with him, he's not had an off season in a college program. He came in, in 2019, he was a true freshman. He came in the summer, like most true freshmen. And then last year, obviously he was rehabbing a torn ACL. He didn't practice at all until, after everyone came back from the COVID shutdown of campus. So that was in like June or July. So I think it will help him to have a full off season. Got a couple, guys who they hope will make an impact at receiver, especially if Mookie Cooper is able to get get a waiver for instant eligibility. I think that would help. Just kind of a guy I think they were missing just someone whose speed can really stretch the defense vertically. On the defense, there's some questions. Obviously, new defensive coordinator, so want to see how that scheme plays out. You have to replace Nick Bolton. That's never going to be easy, and probably not something you can do with one guy who's one of the best linebackers, if not the best linebacker in the country. And I think one of the big question marks is safety as well, where you're losing a couple guys who started for basically 2.5 seasons each. But there's a lot to be excited about. They went 5-5, obviously, against a really tough schedule last year, with having to kind of put together everything on the fly. So having a year where hopefully a more normal off season from a schedule standpoint, and bringing back a lot of the guys who would have graduated should only bode well.
You mentioned the new defensive coordinator, Steve Wilks. As a fan, I was very excited. I thought it was a home run hire. Excuse me. I would like to get both your guys' opinions on that. It looked like Missouri is making a real commitment to the program to support Coach Drinkwitz.
Yeah, I liked it. I mean, certainly you want to see how he does and how he adjusts to college, because he hasn't been in college for so long. There are obviously some unique aspects when it comes to just recruiting and managing the personalities of a bigger roster and younger kids. But I like the idea of going outside the box if you're Missouri, because you're not getting the same caliber of players. There's a same caliber of recruits as a lot of the other teams in the SEC. So you can't just hire a Nick Saban product guy to be your defensive coordinator and run the same defense. So I like the idea of going out and getting someone who's been in the NFL, who's maybe been exposed to more stuff. Obviously that should only help in the recruiting realm, I would think, just being that is the goal for all these kids to get to the NFL. So being able to sell that defensive experience should help. So yeah, I think I think it was a promising hire.
Pat, your thoughts?
Yeah, great hire. Very excited about that as well for Missouri's sake. I think that this is a guy who's obviously proven he can do that work at the highest level. As Mitchell said, what's the level of college adjustment, both, as of now going back to recruiting and dealing with younger players and that sort of thing. But I mean, if you can bring in somebody who's as well respected as he is in the NFL, that's fantastic. And, I just everything really kind of around the program here under Drinkwitz, I think it just feels like the momentum is very positive at this point. Very good first year. Some promising wins, some good young talent coming in, some good talent retention. Recruiting is going well. You keep a good staff, and I just think you have to like where Missouri is at and where Missouri is going.
You guys ready to tackle some of our hard questions from our watchers?
Sure.
All right, Pat, when you were our guest in person, you had strong thoughts about NCAA basketball violations, particularly KU. Would you please give us your updated view and expectations when the ruling finally comes down?
Yeah, unbelievably, we're still sitting here waiting for rulings. So that tells you how this whole process has been. But one thing when we were together a year ago, we could not anticipate COVID. And that's been a huge complicating factor. And then two, the other thing that was the unexpected failure for the NCAA is the use of this independent review panel has slowed down everything so much that it's become a real problem, and it's cost a bunch of money that they weren't expecting. And so from those standpoints, things are not proceeding very smoothly, but eventually we will get rulings. And particularly with Kansas, I think Kansas is going to get smashed. I do. We know now what the allegations are, and they're significant. And having talked to people, people that are objective about these sort of cases, people who have been through them, whether they are lawyers or whether they're former infractions people or hearing people, nobody thinks Kansas has a very strong case. They've been trying to argue that they really were defrauded by Adidas, and Adidas was not working to help them buy players, and that is not going to be an easy sell to a committee. They've had a hard time even selling it on paper. I don't think it'll work well in a hearing room. So I think Kansas is going to get hammered. I think there's going to be multi-year postseason bans for them. We'll see if Bill Self wants to ride that out, or they want to ride it out with Bill Self. Arizona's going to get hammered. They've already taken a self-imposed postseason ban. Auburn has already taken a self-imposed postseason ban. They're going to get hammered. Louisville case will be interesting. We'll see how badly they're going to get hit. The one thing they did is obviously they fired people. North Carolina State's probably going to get a postseason ban, and on and on and on. So there's a dozen schools involved. I think the big cases are Kansas, Arizona, Auburn, LSU, those and Louisville. I would say those are the 5 cases that'll be the biggest in terms of potential impact.
We have a follow-up question to that. Auburn, Arizona taking self opt-out this year in the tournament. What does that have an effect?
We'll see. Probably not as much as they hope. I mean, it's a pretty shameless cop-out. Neither of them having very good seasons, and both of them trying to look like they're being proactive when they already had plenty of chances to be proactive. They're still coached by the same coaches. They never got rid of Sean Miller or Bruce Pearl. So how much do you really care? How much are you just trying to use a bad season as a get out of jail free card? It's not going to work. I expect both of them will get at least one more year postseason ban on top of what they have administered to themselves.
Pat, you are asked if you have a work email that you're willing to share.
Sure. It's pat.forde, F-O-R-D-E, @si.com.
All right. Expect a flood of emails from Mizzou.
Okay.
You had a tweet. I'm morbidly certain that the NCAA tournament will be decided by a handful of horrific charging calls. Pat and Mitchell, why do we think refs can't get this call right?
College basketball is a hard sport to officiate. I complain about the officiating all the time, less so on Twitter, more so just sitting there watching the games. It's the inconsistency is the hardest part. I mean, you'll see games like, against, I think the Mizzou game against Kentucky this past week, I don't remember the numbers, but the first half, relatively let them play. There wasn't a lot of fouls. The second half, both teams were in the double bonus within 10 minutes. So just the inconsistency within games. And, I know that Mizzou Auburn game, there was a similar deal where, fans felt like the call that was being called a charge on one end was being called a block on the other. So I don't know. I mean, it's a hard sport to officiate. These officials probably officiate too many games and don't get paid enough money to be as good at it as they should be. But it's just, I don't see it changing anytime soon.
Yeah, it is a hard sport to officiate, and I know most of the people doing it try their best. But Mitchell's right that they are overextended, and you get to this point of the season when the more the games matter, the more tired the referees are because they've been traveling all over doing 5 games a week. It's a little bit less now, I think, because of the COVID situation, but still, you're at the time they're under the most scrutiny, they're probably doing their worst work, which is a bad combination. And this year, for me, it's just the charges have just driven me crazy. Where it's like anytime anybody gets hit anywhere, they're going to fall down and they're going to get a call. And it's like, that's not a charge. If you glance against somebody's shoulder on your way to the basket when they're moving in front, that's not a charge. And that's become this easy bailout. Well, the guy fell down, charge. No. And so I am concerned that we're going to get to the postseason and it's just going to be this endless array of bad charging calls against people. So I'm hopeful I'm wrong, but I'm going in a little bit pessimistic there.
Next question for Mitchell. Do you expect any of this year's seniors opting out or opting to come back for a free year to maintain experience and keep the band together?
That's a good question. And, probably something they don't even know the answer to yet. I think it probably depends a little bit on how this year finishes up. I think Jeremiah Tillman will leave for sure. He's looked into that option the past couple of years. He's got a son, and he's playing. I truly don't think there's anything left for him to really prove after this year. He's kind of put it together as much as he's going to put it together. I think he'll have opportunities, be it in, the G League or a 2-way contract or overseas. The others, there's some I have reasons to think they could and also couldn't. Like Mitchell Smith, Could he maybe stand to benefit from a year where he's the primary big man? Yes. He's also been in college for like 6 years. So does he want to come back for number 7? I don't know. That's a lot of time to be in school. Drew Smith, same thing. He had to sit out a year when he transferred. I think he's getting married this summer. Does he want to get on with his life? Maybe. But at the same time, maybe he wants to get a master's degree or something. I don't know. Mark Smith, could he maybe benefit from a bigger role? Yeah, but I don't know if I see him. I kind of feel like he also just kind of is what he is at this point. And if he's, wants to make money playing basketball, probably best to just go ahead and take advantage of the years you have. I could see Drew Buggs coming back, the grad transfer from Hawaii. He wants to be a coach. He's been pretty outspoken about that. I could see him, kind of taking a year where he's back on the team and just kind of learning under the coaches to kind of prepare for a GA role or something like that. And then not a senior, but I'm very curious to see what Xavier Pinson does. I think Missouri needs to get him to come back. Does he want to do that? I don't know. He put his name in the draft last year, but assuming most of the seniors probably go, he's got a chance to be, kind of the focal point next year. And I think could be a compelling pitch from Konzo Martin, but, without him coming back, you're not looking at a lot of experience at guard. So that's probably the most fascinating of the cases in my mind.
We have a number of questions to get to, and folks, we'll try to get to them all, but we want to be respectful of our guest time. Mitchell, do you know why Davey on Bradford ended up at Kansas State, not Mizzou? Thought early on he was leading toward Mizzou.
Yeah, I think basically, Missouri knew it only wanted to take one high school big in that recruiting class. And, they were recruiting a few of them, both Bradford and Jordan Wilmore mainly kind of at the same time. And Wilmore jumped on it first and committed. And then they just kind of said, I don't think we've got a spot for you for Bradford. So we'll be interested to see. Bradford's been pretty good on albeit very bad team this year. So we'll be interested to see what ends up happening with him.
Pat, we're being asked to plug your podcast. Great source of information on college football, basketball, and fried chicken sandwiches. Go ahead and plug.
Okay, yes. The Yahoo Sports College Podcast is it. One of the nice things about my role at Sports Illustrated, they've allowed me to keep doing my podcast with my old Yahoo buddies, Pete Thamel and Dan Wetzel. And so you can get that on, Spotify, Stitcher, Google, Apple, whatever, wherever you get your podcasts, Yahoo Sports College Podcast.
All right. Mitchell, is there any inside scoop on the decision to replace Brick Haley with Jethro Franklin?
Only speculation, to be honest. Just the timing of it, in my mind, suggested that maybe Steve Wilkes had a defensive line coach in mind who he brought to Eli Drinkwitz's attention. Was that after Drinkwitz said maybe he wanted to part ways with Brick Haley, or Brick Haley expressed interest in parting ways with Missouri? I don't know. But I do think I would at least say I can pretty firmly speculate that Franklin and Wilkes, had a relationship, and Wilkes kind of suggested Franklin, but I don't know if that led to Haley wanting to leave or if Haley had expressed interest in leaving on his own before that.
Pat, you have Gonzaga and Baylor. What will it take to beat those teams, and who might have a chance of doing it?
I think the only teams that have a real good chance of doing it are each other. I think they are head and shoulders above everyone else. I was interested. Gonzaga last night, I think, showed they'd been getting a little bit bored. And so now here they're playing BYU at BYU. They lost there last year. This game had a little bit of buzz. Okay, maybe here's the West Coast Conference team that can hang with them. Gonzaga killed them. So they showed what they can do. It's the best offensive team and maybe the best defensive team in the country for me. Gonzaga, best offense. Baylor certainly in the running for best defense and best all-around team. Right now, I'd put Baylor number 1 and Gonzaga number 2. Who can beat them? Boy, I mean, we'll see. We'll see who comes out of the Big Ten. Michigan, Illinois, Ohio State, I think, are all really good. The one thing that could trip up Gonzaga is just you get used to winning easy, and all of a sudden you get into a brawl in the round of 16 against some 8-loss team from the Big Ten that's used to just playing really tough games, and maybe you start to press a little bit, you start to get uptight, and you don't play your best game. I think that's the only thing that's the best, most realistic scenario for beating Gonzaga. With Baylor, it's just maybe if they hit a game where they don't make a ton of shots and they're playing a tall, athletic team. They don't have a lot of athletic length. Those are the only things I see holding either of them back. I fully expect to see them both in the Final Four.
You think Rick Pitino will return to a Power 5 school?
I don't know. We'll see. You know, I mean, he's back in college basketball. He's at Iona, and that situation's gone so well that they haven't played since before Christmas. Their last game was December 23rd. So they've just had a COVID debacle up there. He was doing pretty well as expected with what he had. I mean, he's a great coach. There's no doubt about it. He's going to get some sanctions here whenever the Louisville case goes through, probably sit out half of next year, I would guess, for his role in that. Do I think somebody would eventually take it? Yeah, it wouldn't shock me. But he's getting up there in years. I mean, he's mid-60s now. So his window is closing, but it would not shock me if somebody gives him one more chance.
We talk about the experience of the Mizzou basketball players. We also have a coach in his 4th year at a school for the first time. How important is that, and what part may it have played in his ability to adapt and speed up his team's play this year?
Yeah, I think that's super important. You know, I mean, obviously Konzo did a really good job that first year, and that was kind of, you know, it was kind of crazy how that all came together. But I think that also, in a way, set the program, you know, his ability to build what he wanted back a little bit, because he kind of had to go all in on, you know, the Porter brothers, who he knew weren't going to be there that long, and of course ended up getting less out of them than he planned, and, you know, getting a grad transfer in Cassius Robertson. But, you know, after that, clearly the plan kind of shifted to try to, you know, get guys who fit what he wants to do and are going to be around for a few years. And, you know, I think the fact that they're having this much success obviously does, you know, bode well for, you know, the future, where, you know, the one thing I think you can, you know, question with him is he's not recruited at a super high level, especially not since his first year. You know, there's been a lot of talented kids from the area that have gone elsewhere. So you have to be able to take guys like, you know, Javon, Pickett, and Drew Smith, and you know, guys like that, Mitchell Smith, who, you know, no one was banging down the doors for those guys, and turn them into, you know, key pieces on a team when they're upperclassmen. So, and I will say, you mentioned coaching adjustments too. I think his decision to play faster this year has been probably the single biggest difference from last year to this year, right up there with Jeremiah Tillman's emergence. I mean, they you know, they were playing against an Alabama team that's top 10 in tempo on Saturday, and they were the aggressor, and Alabama was not ready for that. And that's been the case in a lot of games this season. So I think that was a wise move.
Great analysis. Pat, your partner Dan Wetzel had an important article yesterday about the Reeds and the tragic collision Thursday evening. Do you have any further insights and or opinions?
Yeah, it was a great column, and that was the reason, to me, Dan Wetzel's the best columnist in America, because he finds important stories and he's not afraid to tackle them, even if they're sensitive topics or controversial. You know, it was a time everybody's kind of still thinking about the football game, and he moved past it to really, frankly, a bigger issue, and what the fallout of this could be, not just for that poor family, but for Kansas City, for the Chiefs organization, for the Reed family. It's really significant. I mean, this is going to be, I think, a major story to watch what happens as more information comes out, because it looks really bad. It looks very bad in terms of the circumstances of what happened, how it happened. Where was Britt Reed? Was he drinking at the facility? 3 days before the Super Bowl, 4 days before the Super Bowl. I mean, there's a lot of extremely bad optics here that the Chiefs need to clear up one way or the other. Explain what happened, and then take action if that's what happened. So, this is one of those stories that I think we're going to be actually watching and paying attention to for quite a while.
It's a very tragic story, and we all very much pray for that young girl that she comes through. So, last question from our viewers: was Jim Sturk really a candidate at Central Florida for the AD job?
Yeah, I mean, I think he was. Here's what I know. We started hearing about, those rumors basically as soon as I woke up Friday morning. So around 8 a.m. Central Time, started asking around, and never got any sort of, denial from the people in the Missouri athletic department that until about 12, 13 hours later. In my mind, if there's nothing there, they could have got in front of that a lot sooner, especially as more and more people started asking, because I know we weren't the only ones. So I'm sure there was some sort of, conversation. Alexander Cartwright, the former Missouri chancellor, is the president at Central Florida. Jim Sturk does have a family tie there. I think his daughter works there or worked there. So I do think there was, some definitely talks between the two. But ultimately, either a job was never offered or it was turned down.
We wrap up here. Mitchell, give us a prediction for tomorrow night.
I think it'll actually be a close game. I think it'll be kind of a grind. Ole Miss plays good defense. Neither team shoots the ball particularly well. I don't want to pick against Missouri because I think it's kind of a toss-up thing. I don't want to make people mad, so I'll pick Missouri like 64-61.
And any update on Javon Pickett? His status?
Yeah, no, so we actually, just before I got on here, had a Zoom press conference, but we talked to Cornell Mann instead of Konzo today. And I asked him, but he basically said, we'll see, he's going to just see how he feels. So I think that's kind of similar to Saturday, where they gave him a chance to test it out in pregame, and he didn't feel like he could go early. Maybe he did, but the coaches didn't feel like he could go. So I think it'll be kind of a similar situation on Wednesday.
I think he's a guy they really need on both ends of the court. He just brings a lot of energy. And I think you had the comment or Cornell Mann did, that he would play on one leg if he could. He's the hardest working guy on the team. So.
Yeah, for sure. No, they definitely need his defense and energy.
Trivia note for you all for watching that game tomorrow. Devontae Shuler, as Mitchell mentioned, the best player for Ole Miss. His AAU team, he was the best player on that AAU team too. His teammates were Zion Williamson and John Morant. And the guy that everybody was talking about was Devontae Shuler.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow, that is a great story. Yeah, I guess he'd be a couple years older than them,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. So like he was a little more advanced than those two guys, and they played. I think it was earlier on. Like Zion might have been like 15 or 16. Same with Ja, but both the other guys turned out pretty good.
Yeah. Gentlemen, you are both a wealth of knowledge. We really appreciate your time. Pat Forde from Sports Illustrated. His Twitter handle is @byPatForde, BY Pat Forde, FORDE. And Pat, now we've got your email. We know about your podcast. You're going to be getting hits, by thousands of viewers here today. So. Mitchell Forde, his Twitter handle @Mitchell4D, the numeral 4, letter D. Gentlemen, thank you so much. You are great grads of the University of Missouri Journalism School, and it is a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for everyone for having us. Appreciate it.
Hope we see you in person next year and get you a flea market burger. So
let's do it.
Hey, don't forget, you can watch these on YouTube. Please spread the word, get as many listeners as we can. We had a lot of success with views on our YouTube channel, and that'll be posted tomorrow. Our guest next week will be ESPN's Adam Teicher, who covers the Chiefs. We had hoped to be talking about a win, but I'm sure Adam will give us a lot of insights into the Chiefs and what they're going to have to do in the offseason. Also, further discussion on the Britt Reed incident. So I think it'll be a great one to tune into. Again, for more information on membership, and again, we're going to have a golf tournament, go to kctigerclub.com. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you next week.